Hey everybody, welcome to Frame Rate, where we rate frames. Today, we have 4 people on this podcast, which is more than normal. It's either 2 or 3. And today we have Maggie Mayfish.
Hello.
And Katy Stoll.
Hi, guys.
Along with Michael and I as normal.
Howdy, howdy. Maggie, please continue speaking nasally or people won't recognize you.
Yeah, that's how we differentiate ourselves.
So, let the audience know exactly what just happened. So basically what we did is we found a version of I Love You, Daddy, which is the final
movie.
One would hope it's the last one he gets to make.
Louis C.K. movie in existence. We really wanted to do it not because we're like necessarily big fans of Louis C.K. Obviously, we all were having conversations about how, like, when he came on scene and he did his specials, like, funny guy.
Funny guy.
Good stand-up. And Louis came out. Lucky Louis came out. But what we got now is a movie that we really want to talk about, given the news about Louis C.K. and his predatory aspects.
We should say we didn't pay for this movie.
Yes.
This was a torrent, so there was no supporting of Louis C.K. happening in any capacity in this situation.
Thank you for outing us as criminals on the show.
I hear that.
Yeah. Okay. You can edit this if you want, but
No, it's fine.
But the address is no.
Actually, one of the things that made me really want to cover this movie was when I was still on Louis' email list and I got the email that was announcing this movie's coming out and how excited he was about it, like the eve before everything hit. And it was this long diatribe about how grateful he was for everyone who funded Horace and Pete because that money directly funded I Love You, Daddy. And I was never so glad to not have been part of something, like funding something. And so I do think it's important to cover this horrible piece of shit, because it's a movies podcast, so this is how we can talk about the cultural moment we're in through the lens of movies, but also because you got to know where your money goes affects everything. Yeah. And it's really hard to see all these people like Edie Falco. Helen Hunt is in it all of a sudden. Like in the first shot, you see Helen Hunt and your heart sinks. Yeah.
It's weird. Throughout the movie, we were having a conversation, like, did people know? I think that a lot of the actors, probably most of them, didn't know the rumors. Not necessarily, like you said, we don't know people's private lives. But they read the script.
Yeah,
like by the end, I was like, this is not. It's poorly written. It is offensive on so many levels. Like, it's very difficult to understand why anybody would say yes to doing this project, except for maybe the little girl.
Even if
Grace.
he was like a celibate priest. You're like, so the script is offensive on its face. Like the scenes are offensive.
Yeah, and like it's message is confusing, and I'm sure that did not come across on the script either. Like, what are you trying to say about stuff?
Because while it does seem to like wag its finger or say like, oh, this situation is bad, where an older director is dating Louis C.K.'s young daughter, it also justifies it a lot. And every single female character argues in support of it, saying that this gives terrible justifications for what is rape.
Right.
And so it's very confusing. It's completely unclear what you're supposed to take away from it.
Yeah.
It felt to me like he was processing his love for Woody Allen, like that John Malkovich is basically just Woody Allen, and he also wants to be Woody Allen, and it seems confusing, I think, because he's confused.
Yeah.
When he's because it felt very much like, I'm going to put forth a question, which I think is actually a valid question we're all dealing with. If an artist you love turns out to be a total creep, can you still love their art? And of course, it's directly relevant to himself as well. But like, he seems to, the whole movie, be coming from the place of, how can we still like Woody Allen? He never entertains the idea that there might be a line that you pass that is a transgression, that, yeah, you should lose your career. And like, he's not willing to say that.
Right.
Because he knows he's that guy. And so it feels like all the scenes are approaching the question and attempting to approach it with tact very clumsily, but always from the standpoint of like, can I use feminism to make it okay? How can Woody Allen be okay? And it's like, why is that your overarching goal?
Yeah. And also just, I mean, overall, the characters were not well written, not at all, like surface level. So it's hard to like ask those questions and then have no interesting characters with a full life to like get into it. So it was like he was almost scared to ask these questions because he didn't even do it justice by writing a story that had anything to do with like feelings or interpersonal relationships. And it's like the thing when we were watching it, we're like, this would be an okay movie if it was told from the point of view of his daughter, because it's about her.
Right.
It is about her choices. But the movie he wrote was about this father trying to decide what is okay and what is not okay in professional and home settings.
Well, his whole Louis C.K. MO is I'm just this guy kind of blundering through life and like, oh, this is this crazy observation and you can't see me, but I'm like making the shruggy emoji.
I see you. It's good.
You are the emoji.
It's
Right.
great.
But and like you said, yes, this is a subject that we can dive into, but under no circumstances do we need to see it from that shrugging guy's point of view.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Let me just for the audience, because a lot of people weren't even, when we tweeted it out, weren't even familiar with the title of it because it had been so squashed by the distribution and social media, because it came out in like September 9th and that was just in limited release. So by the time that it hit any of our eyeballs, the news had already come by. So basically there's only a few arcs. I'll go through it quickly. Basically, Louis C.K.'s the dad of Chloe Grace Moretz, who is like in a Lolita situation with John Malkovich, who's like idolized by Louis C.K. in this movie. He's like a famous director, kind of in like a Roman Polanski strange way, which we'll get into later. In addition, there's a lot of women around Louis C.K. who are instrumental in his decision making, and he's this, as Michael said, this Woody Allen kind of figure who's just like kind of just ambling by. Rose Byrne is in it as this kind of like possible professional relationship where she'll be the lead in his new sitcom, is what it's implied.
She's also a romantic interest.
She's also a romantic interest. At one point they actually get together. Charlie,
and then after they get together in bed, she explains to him why young women should be allowed to fuck old men if they want.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
And
one
then
of many
later-
situations where a woman says that.
Right. And then, later, like, basically says that she slept with him for the role.
Right.
So it's like...
And let's note that, like, so the whole crux of the movie from his point of view is constantly trying to tell his daughter, you can't have sex with this old man, and then eventually getting up the courage to confront the old man and say, are you having sex with my daughter? Then you just cut to the Emmys, and they worked on a 12-episode season of television together and are collecting their Emmys.
I don't think they worked on it together. I think he got kicked off of it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But just the idea that he's even sitting with
Right.
him at the Emmys talking about how much he admires him is so bizarre to me that he never addresses not only is he creepy, but his character is also wildly unprofessional all the time, like sleeping with a lead actress in a series you're writing. And no one even calls him out for that. Like the unprofessionalism is not even on the movie's radar because there's so much crazier shit going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Charlie Day makes an appearance as a very, very crude friend of Louis C.K., who at one point we all kind of
At 2 points.
At 2 points. We all turned to each other and were like, because the situation was in the movie that Charlie Day hears that Rose Byrne is going to be a possible, like, I'm in the movie, co-star. And he just starts vigorously masturbating on a couch
While he's on the phone with the girl.
while Louis C.K. is
While
on the phone.
Gesturing. Not actually masturbating. Not
guys-
that matters at all.
Yeah,
Just-
right before Edie
that
Falco
thing,
arrives.
Yeah.
he stops masturbating.
He
at that
doesn't.
point.
He doesn't.
He keeps
Oh,
going.
he does.
Yeah.
So Louis
I
C.K.
forgot
is on
that.
the phone
I blanked
with
it out. I
Rose
licked away.
Byrne. Eddie Falco's in the middle of the room being
Right.
frustrated, and Charlie Day is on the couch aggressively masturbating for a solid 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a pretty
Fake
it's-
masturbating.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I just have to point out that it's offensive on so many different levels because right before that this is his first scene other than just seeing him walk into a hotel and be a cool guy and shake hands with the doorman. And then it cuts to him and his opening bits are an Al Jolson Mammy impression, which I don't even think a lot of our listeners will be old enough to know who Al Jolson is, but trust me, it's wildly offensive. Like he's essentially making a blackface reference. Then he starts masturbating. It's just like boom, boom.
And he's supposed to be funny. All should say, these are all comedians. It's supposed to be a comedy. There's nothing funny about this movie.
Oh yeah,
there
last
isn't
0 times.
no jokes.
There's like two.
There's like two.
And I'm here to say, maybe to my shame, but I have to be honest, I thought Louis C.K. was incredibly funny, like in his stand-up phase. So I don't know. I want listeners to know that I am grappling with that. I'm not trying to gloss over. Like, I can't lie and say when I saw his specials, I didn't laugh my ass off.
No,
but
I
I
think-
don't anymore.
I actually think it's important that we identify that it's not like the second that news hits that we're like, all the things that we felt previous to it are not real.
Right.
Because that actually makes it like people on the other side who don't see the obviousness of how horrible the situation is are going to be like, well, those are just people who just reacted. No,
Right, or
we're
didn't even
all-
like
This
him the
is-
first
this is
place.
outside
right,
of
no,
it.
no,
Yeah.
like this is a real situation, and we are all have the ability to change. Hopefully, like Louis C.K. will.
Yeah. I mean, look. Yeah, you can look at his old stuff. I mean, I haven't gone back to look at his old work since everything. I've known about the Louis C.K. allegations for several years now, and I've been really upset about it, and always wanted to talk about it, but didn't feel like I could because it's not my story until these things started coming out. So I stopped following him a while ago. But yeah, I can probably say that his work that I loved earlier, that I don't know if I would still like it, but probably not. I probably wouldn't, but I haven't even bothered to look at it. But this, regardless of of all this other stuff, if I watch this movie, I don't think there's anything funny about it.
Oh yeah.
Right. We all kind of like looked at each other and said like, if there was no allegations, like this might have ended his career.
Yeah, it's that bad. It's
Yeah,
so bad.
it's-
It's badly written, badly directed, badly put together.
It looks like a student film.
Looks like a student film. All of those titles.
The characters are entirely reactionary.
Yeah.
There's nothing that really happens. I understand that we said like, yeah, it's a Woody Allen thing, so it's like kind of people ambling by and like reacting to things, but like it doesn't have any of the fangs that an early Woody Allen has. It smacks of a later Woody Allen picture where it's just like a self-described like way to give myself an excuse to look at women who are very young. And that's essentially what the movie's about.
Well, and one of the big takeaways is that Malkovich, I think they're like, well, there was that scene where he obviously could have had sex with her and he didn't, so I guess it's fine that he was grooming her to have sex with her just because it didn't reach culmination. But also, oh damn, I lost my train of thought. Distracted myself. Someone hop in.
Also, it wasn't funny and bad.
Yeah, there
Gotcha.
you
Got
go.
your back. No.
That saved it. No, I just thought one of the big takeaways, I'm back on track,
Yeah, great.
was yes, he's a child molester, but we're supposed to think John Malkovich is acceptable and not dangerous because he's open and honest about being a child molester. Like, it's supposed to be refreshingly humorous that when he's with Chloe Grace Moretz in the mall, she's like, why'd you take me to the mall for a date? And he's like, because I like looking at young girls here. And she's like, why? And he's like, because they're prettier than old women. And she's like, that's charmingly honest,
she, like,
refreshingly
giggles.
honest. And the takeaway, I guess, is that, and I resent it on every level, that all men feel that way and we should just be honest about it. And it's like, no, Louis, you're trying to convince yourself that that is true.
Yeah, it was so weird to see these characters say things like that because it's like this is not speaking to me, so like I'm not the audience for this. Like, who is this ringing bells for? Or like who's sitting back being like, oh yeah, like yes, John Malkovich, because it's like that whole movie made me so uncomfortable and like we were all cringing at different points. So like Who is that for? Who did Louis think he was talking to when he was writing it? I mean, himself.
It's unbelievably tone deaf.
He literally, Malkovich literally says, words written by Louis C.K. Yes, I'm a pervert, but at least I'm talking to you like a normal human being. Which to me is like kind of the thesis statement of this movie, because it's kind of, as you can imagine, this kind of condensed fake apology, cry for help from Louis C.K. I mean, I don't know if it's a cry for help, if it's, but it's clearly intentional. Him saying, I don't know why I do this, I don't know if I'm right or whatever, but I understand that people react negatively to it, and I have a lot of guilt about it, and that excuses it, because I'm just a normal human being, and I'm talking to you. Like, that's his stand-up, is when he says, like,
I'm a shitty person.
I'm just a normal. I'm talking to you normal, but yes, I'm a pervert, and we're all perverts, which is a statement, but it's also not a statement for him to make.
I also, I just interviewed a sex therapist, and I think she backed me up on this. There's like such a difference between openly exploring whatever sexual urges you have and being an adult fucking a kid. It's just very different. Or closing the door and masturbating in front of someone who is looking for a job from you. They're just totally different than like getting into S&M or whatever the fuck you want to do, which is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, Katy, if you went back, no, it does not hold up.
Yeah.
And there's a Daily Zeitgeist episode recently where I forget her name, but a great comedian guest was saying, and I think this is so true, it's like, you also ruined your art. Like, fuck you for that. Because I tried to watch old Louis C.K. specials, and it's legitimately ruined. It's creepy and disturbing. And as she said, which I thought was great, could you just not be a fucking rapist so I can fucking watch your movies? Like, every guy in Hollywood, just like, this is the bare minimum. I want to be able to watch Hook. God damn it. Yeah. It's interesting to me that by the end, there are also scenes where Louis C.K. basically direct to camera is sobbing, saying, I'm sorry, I fucked it all up. I'm nothing. It's too late. I can't fix it. So it's like, it's this crazy fever note from someone who like wants to be caught but still thinks they're getting away with it.
Right. Yeah, it's from the very beginning. It just feels like, okay, so if I've known about these rumors for several years, they've been circulating for longer, and he's been quashing those stories. Mm-hmm. He's got to know. In fact, Michael, I think that you're somebody that said it to me once, like when we were discussing this a while back, but before it broke, where you were like, if he was smart, he would get out in front of it. Like, you know, like say, like, I'm sorry, guys. I have some confession to make. I'm fucked up. I need help. Help me.
Right.
And then people would have been like, you know, there's a path there to redemption.
In a way that Dan Harmon recently
exactly,
did.
Yeah, exactly.
In early January.
But so all of this is happening, and he makes a movie that is so twisted that is just going to poke the bee's nest. So if the news hadn't broke, it would have by this movie.
Oh, right. And during the lead up to the movie being released, people asked him again about the rumors, and he said what he had been saying, which is they're crazy. It's all lies.
Which is something in the movie that he defends the rapey older man by saying they're just rumors.
Yeah, it's like
he literally has lines like, "Yeah, are we going to judge a great artist just because of some rumors that they're a pervert?" You're like, okay,
yes,
go on.
Well, and the weird thing is because it's exactly like he. And so many times, like, they could just address it. And, you know, they could say, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm fucked up in this way. Or, like, you know, whatever sort of apology. But, again, his apology mostly talked about himself. And it was like, you are just, it's not sinking in. And this movie does nothing to help you. And it's just, like, it was like watching someone's, like, twisted psyche about making themselves feel better about something that they're clearly, like, super guilty about.
I don't want to derail us, but I think it's like important that can we go around, or at least like, especially you two guys.
I'm gonna say our voices. This is Katy Stoll right here.
No, no.
And this is Maggie.
No. Like, what was the most memorable scene for you guys, and like what took you out of it the most? Like, what was the moment where you're like, "Fuck you," or it was like, "I don't."
There were so many.
I know there's a lot, but like that because there's levels of complexity that made me more and more angry, and there was obvious ones where he was just like, I'm a pervert and that's fine kind of stuff. But like, I don't know about you guys. Like, what were your big scenes?
I think the two moments, one with Rose Byrne and one with the teenage daughter, when they both said, yeah, I fucked an old dude at 15, or as the teenage girl said, I had a boner for you when I was 14, really, really, really upset me. Because having women that he's listening to schooling him, justifying saying that this rape was okay, and also the vernacular of "I had a boner for you," is
written
like
by a man.
written by a man.
And it's like an echo of a classically old toxic masculinity chestnut, which is women just want to fuck their dads, man. You just got to be like their dad. That's how you get them.
That's what this whole movie was.
That's a thing that older generation believes about courting.
Yeah.
How about you, Maggie?
Oh man, I don't know. This movie, it just confused me because I think I expected it to be more him defending himself or the other way. But it was like so middle wishy-washy. It was almost just like really sad. But I guess the moment when he's like explaining what feminism is to his like young daughter, it was just like,
and he was so disrespectful to her. Also.
Yeah, it's like, you were disrespectful. But even like the women characters that he wrote, like one of them is just like mean for no reason, and his daughter is like so surface level that it was like, oh, like it doesn't. Well, that was all.
Calls him daddy, sits on his lap.
Calls him daddy, sits
and
on his
the
lap.
arc of the movie is that at the end she no longer calls him daddy, and she is like a stronger, more empowered woman, which because she's severed ties with him and she's off making her own money and stuff like that. So like that's also something that's confusing for me is that he's like you see that he is saying he did this to his daughter,
right?
I feel like he's grasping sometimes in the movie for the concept that doesn't feminism mean if a 14-year-old wants to fuck me, she should be allowed to? I think he tries to turn empowering his daughter into, it's crazy. It's like if you want to do a story about a daughter who grew up in a rich bubble and then finds her own sense of identity, why would the methodology be she fucks a really old guy? You go, girl. That's uplifting. You have the freedom to fuck a 70-year-old man if you want. He's like, it's such a warping of feminist ideology that it fucking is really insulting. Multiple people, him and Malkovich, lectured the woman character on how feminism proves that she should fuck the old man.
And the movie as a whole, this is what my takeaway was, or at least like the big thing that influenced me, just dealing with things as like looking at my own teaching and like the world that I came from and like where I was when I learned about feminism and like how I wasn't taught that from the get-go. These kinds of things. What's crazy about this movie is that it's rampant in its lines of dialogue that says like, she's a badass, or she's so great, or she's like just in general like ingratiating all the female characters in it. But it's like a double-edged sword. Like on one hand it does that, which feels entirely false, not with the allegations, but just in the movie. They turn none of the women really have agency. They're entirely reactionary, especially the woman who's like basically whose story it should be, because it's that Lolita story, as Maggie, you mentioned. Like, it should be Chloe Grace Moretz's story. That's the most interesting person here dealing with these issues, and she is just not able to suss out things in a way that a normal human would. It's so one-dimensional and so damaging to, I think, in a more like social media kind of like what we're aware of or what we're exposed to in general online or just in life. This idea that like it replaces feminism if you just say women are great. Well, yeah, that's totally true. People are great. Also, like what the Like, if you're gonna
but also
do
that
this
does
shit,
nothing. It's like actions. What you do
it's
is
exactly.
It's not what you say. It's not what you say online. You're just talking to your own bubble. But that made me think of the other thing that this movie brought up, which is that like dichotomy of women are either she's your daughter who's gonna like fuck everything, or she's like this professional woman who's like beautiful and a badass and like untouchable. It's like the
and has her hair up.
Yeah,
without exception.
exactly.
If your hair's down, you're there to be leered at. If your hair is up, you're a mom.
Right.
Right.
It had that like that dichotomy of thinking, which is dangerous and comes from misogyny.
Well, yeah, there's like you're like we said earlier, zero development. Everybody's a one-dimensional character, probably to try to create comedy, but there's no comedy, so it's just weird.
It's supposed to be situational comedy. It's supposed to be like, look how he's in a Colonel Sanders, like John Malkovich.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that a strange situation to be?
He's eccentric.
He's got a camouflage kimono. How hilarious. I'm like, I get how these are nods. I'm not trying to say like that type of comedy can't be like subtly funny, but
The Big Lebowski is that. You're just laughing at the situations mainly.
But here it just rings so false because it's just wrapped up in this horrible, rotten kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
It seems, well, you were talking about the double-edged sword, and I feel like it really boils down to certain guys feel that if they say, yeah, women are great, they're the stronger sex, men are pigs, ha ha ha. It sounds complimentary, but they're basically saying, I'm going to continue being a pig because I think that's manly. And that's it's such a weird double-edged sword.
Well, he said that during the election. He said that Hillary Clinton or a woman should be president because they're better, which is like,
that's not actually complimentary.
Right. No,
Yeah.
feminism is that the idea that men and women are equal,
Yep.
and that does mean that women are can be just as shitty as men, even with like sexual harassment stuff. Like,
And it's yes, and you see that all over this movie. The thing about Louis that we know, I think we've touched on this earlier, like, okay, he has this persona as being this kind of shitty guy. It turns out that's actually who he is. This movie feels very autobiographical. He's surrounded by these women who are pushing him around, and they're very one-dimensional, and you're supposed to be sympathetic to him. But he does seem to like put women on pedestals in a way, or like dehumanizes them, which is exactly the fucking problem with locking the door and masturbating in front of a lady. It's just the whole thing oozes that crazy fake pro-woman thing, which is also very Aziz. I'm sorry, but I don't have to go there now.
My favorite scene was when Chloe Moretz put on her Hit Girl costume from Kick-Ass and chopped off Charlie Day's hands while he was masturbating.
mine too. Fun.
But actually, can I give the scene that I just want to call out the scene where it took me out of it because it was the only scene where I actually had a glimmer of hope that something was going to happen. Charlie Day's character goes straight up to John Malkovich the first time they meet, and who's the Roman Polanski stand-in or Woody Allen stand-in, and says, so did you fuck that little girl like everyone says you did? And he says, oh my, you're the first person to ever ask me that directly. And he goes, right, but did you fuck that girl? And he goes, I'll tell you about it sometime over drinks. And I was like, oh shit, this is the scene where the Emperor Has No Clothes is actually called out by any character. Oh my God, like a breath of fresh air. Anyone calls out that this is just fucking insane. But no, the comedic premise of the scene was actually how shockingly unprofessional and embarrassing it is that he brought that up. And I'm like, no, every fucking person on set who ever works with John Malkovich should be saying, I can't work with you till you resolve whether you fuck that girl, and if you feel bad, and if you've addressed it, did you fuck that girl?
Yeah.
And if you're going to be cute about it and say, I'll talk about it with you over drinks, we're enemies now. And Charlie Day in the next scene has his arm around him and is just his pal and is no longer pressing him for information. So the scene that gave me hope then like dashed my hopes even more.
Within 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's him being Kramery. Like, isn't it wacky that he said that? Moving on. I'm like, no, that's the whole crux of the thing.
Yeah, that's what you should be talking about.
It was also maybe the only laugh that this room gave was when Charlie Day, so did you fuck that little girl? I mean, a laugh is too strong of a word. Everyone
Well,
kind of went,
really,
huh.
it's that
Someone
like,
said something
tension.
sane.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, a character said a thing that was motivated by something in the movie.
Yeah.
Which,
What a humorous situation.
brother.
But it's, I mean, there was it was palpable how, like, Maggie, you and I looked at each other at one point.
yeah.
Near the end, it's like what we ought to have been the final shot.
There were
Arguably
several.
for reasons, the final shot is the final shot because it's about the relationship between China, who's the daughter, and Louis C.K.
Also, her name's China.
Yeah.
Like pure white, untouched, pristine China.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think was the
Quick
implication.
side note:
porcelain.
only person of color in it was a black singer at the end, and the daughter's black friend for maybe 2 minutes
Right.
total.
The
Yeah.
daughter's black friend's first line is, "This party's about to get retarded."
Yeah,
Yeah.
so...
And
So
one of
he's
her
taking
last-
his cues from like Black Eyed Peas from 8 years
Yeah,
ago
and,
for
her
how
la-
black people
and
speak.
the last line was, "I had a boner for you when I was 14." So,
Right.
So...
well done.
Well done.
Anyway, sorry, Ava.
No. All relevant. But Maggie and I looked at each other because there was like a moment of like surreal kind of like it felt like when you watch The Room for the first time where you go like, there's no way that this was planned. This is just so telling. And what it was is there's this scene that you were mentioning about Malkovich and Charlie Day. Sitting there is like a one shot, it's like a 2-minute scene or less. Louis C.K. is in the background. He plays a lot with like focus, and he's not really a great director. He's never really been. But the point is that scene happens and they walk away with their Emmys. And of course, it's implied that since the camera is like on the table, there's other people at the table, like a typical, Emmy
Right,
party.
it's a round table.
As it exits, a very awkward exit, or as people exaunt, a very awkward exit from a woman whose head is cut off in frame, and she's carrying an Emmy, and she like staggers out. And I say stagger because like it's like a very awkward.
It was so weird,
lead.
yeah.
She
And you had
probably
to like
had camera gear she had to step over or
or
something.
something. It was
Yeah.
and the reason that I think we both were like, what the fuck, is that it's not just a postcard statement to say what is it to say about this movie more than a woman with her head cut off
Holding an Emmy,
but it's
we have
also
no idea
like
who she is.
we don't know who she is. We don't care about what's going on. We just want to revel for just a second. You're not that important.
Right, this is about Louis. He's
You
in
have
focus.
your success though.
Yeah.
You got an Emmy. But I mean,
Let's
like,
stay out of frame. Don't have words.
don't
We don't
have
need to know
words.
who you are.
and also don't like the story's not about you.
Yeah.
And
Well, it is
so
about your
weird.
body, which is why you're included from the neck down.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it felt really bizarre, and like I did not know what to do with my eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny to say about a movie, the entirety of which should have been edited, like until it didn't exist, but it also needed an editor badly. It was like AI at the end where there were several false endings. Because what's crazy is the arcs he sets up are so confusing to him personally. You can tell while he's writing it that he has no resolutions at the end. So it's really hard to predict what sequence is coming next. Like he wraps up his plot with Malkovich and you're like, okay, so fade to black. No, another scene with him and his daughter. And you're like, oh, I didn't even know that was important because you've given her so little of the story. I guess it was really about your relationship with your daughter. So that's the end. No, cuts to him walking in the store with his ex-wife, just generally chatting. And you're like, when is this going to end?
It's a bad movie.
It's bad. It's so bad.
And I think you said, he doesn't make good movies. No, I kept saying this. I kept talking over the movies, complaining that I never liked his shows. I've always thought they felt clunky and like somebody else needed to edit it and stilted. And there's something, on the small screen, especially before I knew everything there about him, something charming about it. It is his ode to Woody Allen. I can get behind it. You think the premise of the situation's funny. But he's a bad director and he's a bad actor.
Oh yeah,
and a very bad
There's
editor.
No emotion.
But
coming from
on Louis, did you think the writing shined? Because like I do think he's a good writer.
I
of
watched.
jokes.
Up until everything that I knew things. I watched the first couple seasons of the show, and I did enjoy it, even though it always bothered me his acting. But I liked the writing enough, and to that, I'm always like, people that are not good at actors, but they're great writers. Write shows. That's what you're good at. Let someone else do the acting.
And not just to put my director hat on, but I couldn't help myself because like I even at one point said to you guys, I'm like, I can't help but notice this. And it's not important, but I do want to say, because some people do watch this for like introspection into that side of the world. There's an 8.5 reference to Fellini at one point with like a beach sequence with Rose Byrne. Also, everything about Rose Byrne in her introduction comes out of what I'm calling like a Catherine Zeta-Jones introduction from Ocean's 12.
I also thought there was some From Here to Eternity. They're having sex on the beach.
Yeah, totally. Or even James Bond. I mean, that's where it's coming from. But just the idea that this little like classic kind of like chirpy music swells, and she is completely mod art out. Like, and by that I mean like she's from the 60s. She's wearing the hat. Every single one of her piece of clothing is either like it's black and white film, but it's like one solid color. Like it's so obvious to me that he just says like, what's my love interest with Rose Byrne? How do I make her more of a character? Well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to dress her in style. And that is so antithetical to the idea of making a character that when you say he's a bad director, he gives her window dressing.
Yeah.
He literally gives her fashion. And that is so, like, it angers me.
Yeah.
Plus, the shot you're referring to, that was the Fellini reference, I believe like one or two shots later, is a shot that looks exactly like those Dos Equis commercials where it's just two beach stands from behind. And it looks so much like it that you can't not. My point is, if you're going to reference some of the greatest shots of all time, the stuff surrounding it has to stand up like at all.
Dos Equis commercial,
Right. Like you can't cut to a shot that you copied so it looks good and then go back to your shitty, clumsy shots.
Yeah.
It's really glaring.
There's also Robert Altman references, which is in the kind of same movement. When Malkovich is just, I guess he goes and buys ice cream and just throws it everywhere. It's this like cameras put up high and wide and zoomed in and looking at these people as if like we're like witnessing, we're amateur, like we're flies on the walls. We're just sitting there looking at this amazing, like real slice of life. And it's done comedically in this instance because it's like Malkovich is larger than life and it's all silly. But like, I think that's how Louis C.K. thinks of himself as a director. He has witnessed things like we all do, and we all like quote things that we admire. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, he doesn't know what that quotation means. Mm-hmm. That quotation is more about the relevance of the situation being either like, if that scene had anything that like had teeth, meaning like if that scene changed anyone's mentality, was an action that caused someone strife, someone was now forever changed. Like now we're talking about like an instance that if you were like a fly on the wall and witnessed might have an added effect with that increased realism.
Well, I would argue that was the moment that moment happened when he was on a sort of date, the first date with the little girl.
Right. It's a story.
So like that was the moment of her falling for him.
Right. It was Moretz retelling the story.
One of them. Yeah.
We're in Central Park doing these crazy things. But like therein is the rub because like it's all wrapped up in this one-dimensional character of Moretz already. So China's telling the story of how stylistic the date was, not talking about how fundamental to any part of like her satisfaction was.
Sure, yeah.
It was just like, look at this guy. This guy's crazy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I still don't know if she was actually into that man because we don't like get to know that character that well. So like, I still don't know if she was into him. I don't know if she felt like
just trying to piss off her dad. Like you never even got insight into her agenda.
I think so.
Yeah.
Like,
my takeaway was that her dad was very much like, you don't do anything, and also doesn't, but at the same time doesn't challenge her to do anything. And part of the scamminess of John Malkovich's was that he listened to her and he talked and he said like, oh, well, it's okay that you don't know what you're doing. That's exciting. Oh, well, talk about feminism. Let me tell you about feminism. Like
this is how you groom a young teen to fuck you if you're an old man. Like these are the tactics.
Impressionable, but
you act like you're listening. Yeah.
But it is a daddy figure. It is like she was looking for that film fulfillment from him or something.
Yeah.
But we don't get very much insight into her, what she's thinking.
Which is like the most important thing in this situation.
This
How
is me
is she
filling
feeling?
in the blanks.
I think that's what's driving me so mad. Is like the only thing that matters is how she feels, and I have no idea. I don't care how Louis feels about this. I don't care how anyone at the award ceremony feels about this. It's the girl who is seeing an older man. How does she feel? I have no idea. And so
we shouldn't have to connect the dots.
That's the only thing that matters in this story, and we have no idea. And the fact that Louis C.K. doesn't like. Oh, the important thing is how this woman, how this woman feels. Like, is it a good, we don't know.
Right, because Harold and Maude exist, and there can be such a thing as a young person and an old person, and it could theoretically not be unhealthy. It depends on the specifics of their dynamic and situation, how mature the younger person is, and we don't investigate any of that.
We don't know.
It's just that she's his property. Is he going to allow her or not to be the property of John Malkovich instead?
Yeah, it's kind of like
It reminds me very much of, I just kind of had an epiphany, or I wonder, I had a fight on Twitter recently with some rando who I was, and I brought up the fact that only 7% of major motion pictures last year were directed by women. And his legitimate response that I believe he believes was, yeah, it's weird. I wonder why women don't like to direct movies.
I've had that too.
Maybe they don't have the mind for it.
Didn't have that.
In some way, they're just not attracted to the prospect of doing movies. And I feel like this movie is Louis C.K. going like, will young women let me do creepy sex stuff to them? I have to figure out why they like that. Why do all women like to fuck old rich men? It's like he's not imagining that there's any possibility that they didn't want him to do that.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Like, just because one person gets off on what, maybe there's a few women out there that was like, yeah, I like it when a guy masturbates in front of me.
Yeah.
Like that makes me feel sexy and in charge.
But again, it's usually not a rich guy that you admire who are
exerting
going
power.
to for a job.
And also it's usually when you've had a couple dates and maybe it's a third day and you're like, hey, I'm into this thing. Let's talk about it. Like,
but like then being like, but
Masturbating
why don't
in front of you is like ninth base?
Yeah, why? So, but like, don't all women?
yeah.
I wanted to ask about splash damage, because we referenced at the top a little bit, like, it's disappointing, but I still don't know if I have the right to judge when you're like, Charlie Day, why'd you do this? Helen Hunt, didn't you hear the rumors? We're all complicit in this toxic society to some degree. Like, obviously we could like go out on the streets now and you could always do more, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I would love everyone's thoughts on, like, I definitely don't give Louis C.K. any money now. Do I give Helen Hunt ever? You know what I mean? How do you judge people who do work with creeps?
It's interesting because, again, I think there's a world where the Helen Hunt, where Rose Byrne doesn't know the allegations. But on the other hand, again, they read the script.
And I guess I was wondering, let's assume they do. Are they evil now?
I'd hate calling anyone evil because it's like, I mean, all of us, I think, at this table are pretty good, but it's like everyone does shitty things. And that's not excusing Louis C.K. Like, fuck him to the end of the earth, go die. But it's like, Helen Hunt, like, you didn't do it. I mean, as far as I know, she didn't do anything shitty. So it's not like I feel like I don't have the authority to judge.
Sure. I think that it's something you just take into consideration.
Yeah.
Well, because so you have a very limited perspective of who Helen Hunt is in our life. We're like, she's this person. She's a human and she's probably not the person that you want her to be. And so here's a choice. I don't know the specifics of how she arrived in this movie, what she knew, what she didn't know. But it gives me pause. I don't see that many Helen Hunt movies, so I don't know. But, I also think that we are you mentioned when we started watching, this was shot 2 years ago. This was well before stuff had broke, and it was a very different climate. I'm a political detour. I was a huge Hillary Clinton supporter. Still am. If she ran right now, she would need to answer for her husband's assault situation.
Yeah.
So I now hold people to a higher standard. I see that you made this before it all happened, so there's a little bit of a pass, but I do take that information and I'm not going to forget it. I'm not going to forget this performance from Charlie Day.
Yeah,
Right,
I
yeah.
agree. I don't ever want like a young actor who's up and coming and this is their only big break to just have their career ended because they took the big break, because that's so
Right.
easy to empathize with. And yet it's still galling how people just keep being in Woody Allen movies. And you're like, how about you don't be in his
I
movies?
don't. They can
Why
make
would you want to be associated with that?
And
Like,
they're
yeah.
like, because
don't-
30 years ago he made a great
I think
movie.
we've
Like,
seen the
so?
last
So,
Woody
yeah.
Allen.
I
They're
don't
not
know.
great.
I don't know if this reveals my ignorance. Maybe I always think I have a lot to learn, but I cannot blame them in any regard. Only because I think that they're just trying to make a living, like you said, and then on top of things, like, we can't infer without knowing, like. That's the court of public opinion. If we're like, didn't you know? Well, you didn't answer that question. That's a very valid question. Did any of them know? Like, so Charlie Day masturbating, thinking it's funny. He's done that before in other things. And
Always
we're,
Sunny, right.
in like
Right.
Horrible Bosses, and we didn't like go like, you bastard then. So like, why are we doing it now? And in that respect, I'm also crazy because I think that I think monsters are allowed to make art. I think that they should be considered monsters, like Roman Polanski or Woody Allen or Louis C.K. now in that fold.
Right, Chinatown's still good. You're saying.
Chinatown's still good. Yes, you go, this was made by a mind that is horrible.
I
but-
think that you can't. I think in the past you could. I don't think that you can so much anymore because Louis C.K., a monster, continuing to make art at this point would be very, since we've entered this stage of a dialogue and open discourse about sexual assault, etc., would be traumatizing for a lot of people.
Sure.
And I honestly don't think that, I don't know that if Woody Allen has movies in production, but I cannot see that being any sort of a legitimate choice for a distributor or a studio to get attached.
Which,
Right.
They're right, right?
And
Like,
they're
they
right.
should- they
So,
should
Yeah.
just
so
say
this
no.
is a different era. In the past, yes, that's part of what we're all grappling with here is that we did let things slide for a long time and made excuses, but we're not doing that anymore.
Right, and we have to find a way to dismantle that system because, yes, I agree, we can't have the situation where anyone who didn't oppose the system in all its forms and just like kept their head down and did their job is as guilty as a rapist. But at the same time, the vast network of people who actively covered up Harvey Weinstein shit for 20 years
Yeah.
are highly culpable.
Right.
There has to be real culpability there. That's not, like, I agree. It's a different thing than saying, I am an actor or actress who heard some rumors and still agreed to do a film, which is a one-off event, and then it was done. But yeah. So it's just case-by-case basis for sure.
Especially-
because these assholes who are like, yeah, I sicked ex-Assad agents on women that Harvey Weinstein had raped to threaten them into silence. You go to jail now.
Right.
That's no good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's absolutely different. Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts about, because I thought there was an interesting dialogue between the two of you, because he was usually like the four of us, but you guys kind of connected, or you both responded in a like uniquely different ways, but in like kind of like a bigger way, like the same way. And I would like you to speak on the specific scene where Moretz comes back from her birthday party. She's in her gown. She's been rained on, so she's got all the hair is now down, which is like a whole like Woody Allen thing. And he's in his Malkovich is in his camo kimono, and they get high, and then she straddles him, and she tells him how great he is, basically, for a while of like, and all her like, I'm thinking about these things, and then she leaves. And it was the one moment we all talked about, like, well, she did have agency. She wasn't the thing that Louis C.K. said, which was that she's a minor, therefore she can't like make decisions for herself. This is her making a decision for herself. What did you guys think when you were watching that scene? Like, what was obviously loud and like, fuck you, and what was, is this interesting? Is this relevant? What is it?
Here's the thing. I feel like, at least, speaking personally, I'm a pretty like not aggressive person, but when it comes to like pursuing, like someone or whatever.
Sex.
Yeah, sex. yeah, or dates or who. Like I usually make the first move. I'm usually very upfront. Like in that way, it's kind of weird because like when talking about all these like datings and gray areas, I feel like I'm a woman and I've sometimes like have gone the first couple steps, and I also have to think about like, whoa, have I ever made men uncomfortable? Probably. But anyways, so like, but there's such a difference. You can just feel it. It's like palpable. This was a scene like written by a man trying to make a woman seem empowered instead of like, I'm a woman who is empowered and like I know how that feels, and I know, and it's just like, and those characters had no chemistry, so it felt so fabricated. It felt like someone else decided that this character needed to do this now. So what monologue can I give her so she sounds like empowered? It was just so like removed from actually feeling like sexy and in charge and like those things that you actually feel when you're gonna straddle a man. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to paint the scene a little better. She comes in after her party that got rained on, and she's soaked. She's dressed like a princess. She's just had a big fight with her dad, a big blowout where she's like, "You've made me this way," which isn't false. And she kind of gets distressed, and she goes to John Malkovich, who's in the middle of working somewhere. I don't know how she walks into the middle of his home.
Great question.
But he's in the middle of working, and he says, well, I'm working right now. And then she pursues him and lays him down and straddles him and tries to get him high. And he doesn't say a
Get him
word.
high by force. He
By
doesn't
force.
want
Yeah, he doesn't want
It's
to.
almost as if he wanted to paint her as overly pushy so that there's no chance you could confuse that Malkovich is being pushy.
Yeah.
Right.
And it felt like that. And those are obviously the thrust of the scene. Something that I don't think that Louis wrote consciously that I saw was this man manipulating a girl. Like he has towed her along, and flirted with her. And then she makes herself incredibly vulnerable and comes into his space trying to be like, this is what you wanted, right? Here I am. And he doesn't say a word to her and just lets her keep talking, trying to be seductive until she questions herself and she feels uncomfortable and she leaves. Honestly, it kind of broke my heart.
Yeah.
It's actually not agency.
It's not. I
You feel like it's her
Manipulation.
agency
Yeah.
because Malkovich doesn't
Exactly.
speak.
That's why it
but
feels so
Malkovich
false.
is making the choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He
Like,
just literally doesn't speak until
Yeah.
she leaves his
And
room.
it's a power,
so that is the choice.
a power
Right.
move. And that's their last scene that we see with them together, I think. But we are to believe that they continue to have a relationship for some time.
But then at some point he's like done with her, which he said to her.
Which he says.
Like he literally has a monologue about trying to make it poetically relevant that he only likes having sex with young women, and when they get old, he eventually dumps them because there's something beautiful about the feeling of that severance. And you're like, don't romanticize being an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why it rang so false, was because it was just like she was manipulated into this. Like Louis, I think, thought he was writing maybe an empowering, like he thought, oh, like this is, where she decides that she wants to have it. But it's like, no, she didn't. And like, it's clear to me as someone, who, like I said, has no trouble like being very forward like that. But it's like, it wasn't. Ugh.
No,
It was painful.
Yeah.
It's painful, and in like scene study, John Malkovich's high status. There's many scenes in this, totality of cinema and TV where someone who doesn't speak the entire scene has the higher status. That's a good move, but if your move is that he's reaping the quote-unquote benefits of manipulation, he's a villain, right? He's absolutely a villain, and therefore should be treated as such. I'm not saying that there ought be poetic justice or some like neoclassical kind of like karma where like if you're an ugly person inside, you look ugly outside kind of thing. Therefore, John Malkovich should have his comeuppance by the end of the film. I'm not saying how you make film. I'm talking about how the movie does portray it, and it doesn't seem to narrate any form of like judgment upon that. Just as Katie was saying, just as you're saying, like it's almost seen as an excuse. Like, why have that scene if you're not going to make any relevant like picking out of it, other than to say it's a self-apology or a, isn't it weird that we do this? Like, that's why people kind of mention these things.
It seemed to basically be saying, you know how sometimes old dudes fuck underage girls illegally? Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And you're like, no, there's more to it than it's just interesting.
That's
you're
not
like,
the takeaway.
Isn't that fascinating and like aloof and mysterious? No, it's very visceral and direct and clear cut.
And psychologists have studied it for a long time, and like we know about power dynamics and why don't you, if you're writing this, why don't you know about that? Like,
I do think you shouted out the one glimmer of truth, Katie, when Chloe says, "You made me this way," and I wonder if he knows that, because in a normal symbolic reading, that would basically be saying the patriarchy is why she's willing to fuck this old man. And that point I agree with, but I don't know. It's weird. It's like you said, Maggie. It would even be almost less damning if it seemed like he was so far gone he didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. But there's several lines where it's like he knows.
He's clearly self-aware.
He knows what is right and wrong and the system.
Yeah.
And he's agonizing over the fact that he keeps fucking up and not abiding by the code we all know is morally right.
Right.
And it's weird.
Yeah,
he's just like outlining.
It's so
man,
weird.
I keep fucking being a creep and I try not to. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
No, do better.
And and he keeps being allowed to by the women around him, by everybody. But you know, even at the end, we mentioned this earlier. There's that scene where it's like hard to imagine he's not being very personal here, where he's saying, "I fucked up. I ruined it all." And his woman co-worker was like, "You were a great writer, you just aren't anymore." That was like really like powerful. But then she goes on to say, "But we can just make a lot of TV. It's gonna be fine. It's got a whole thing, and that's fun. You're good at it. Let's keep doing it." You're like,
no.
Isn't it interesting that maybe it's not, but I find it the most interesting part of this movie that the false agency that he orients all of his female characters with, of course he's going to be misled by the fact that the women that he masturbated in front of, who didn't do anything, quote unquote, or say anything, he saw as a form of agency. In other words, false agency, because they were like, "Oh, you're not, I can do this. I can get away with this."
Right.
That must mean that this is you allowing it. That's an empowerment of yourself.
that's a justification in your mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what every scene in the third act does, is essentially say, there's deplorable actions that we all make. Act 1 and 2. Act 3, we're all perverts, but at least we're talking to each other like real people. And that's what he thinks he's saying.
Yeah, let your daughter lead her own life. Maybe she won't choose to fuck the old man. Maybe if she does fuck the old man, it'll be good for her. Because like other older...
She'll grow up and get a job.
Yes, a woman tells him straight up, Pamela Adlon tells him, it would be good if she fucked an old man. Something needs to grow her up.
Yeah.
Not that.
I forgot that line. And
this
now
is
I
a
just
woman
Which
who
is
doesn't
also
understand
confusing
this.
because she was the one saying, "You can't have your daughter around him." That was a very confusing.
Oh, yeah. It also just doesn't hold up, as like you pointed out. In the same scene, they go like, it's before lunch because the scene starts with him canceling an upcoming lunch date. Then his daughter arrives and says, "Do you want to go to dinner?" Like, it's also
so
a bad
dumb.
movie where it just is bad and
Yeah,
there's a
it doesn't
bunch
make
of glaring
sense.
problems.
So
with it.
it blows my mind that, okay, it's gone through whatever drafts, it's been sent out to all these people, producers have gone through, they've broken down the scene, and then we're on set, and literally no one at any point in this process says, "Hey man, small continuity error here. 2 minutes ago we said it was lunchtime."
Yeah.
Anyway, it
No,
was...
it's because when you are successful, Like
People will just bend over, but they're like, "Oh, this is great script. Yeah, come on in. Yeah, you're an auteur." Blah, blah,
there's
blah.
a reason why the Harry Potter books get longer as she got more successful.
Sure.
You know, like you're less edited, and I think that's why this is unbridled Louis C.K. He was not edited. He got to do what he wanted and say what he wanted.
And speaking of that Edie Falco scene, it just hit me how amazing it is that the last shot of this movie is Louis C.K. being comforted by a woman that he's not listening to. Her voice fades out, and he's staring into space.
It happens twice.
Yeah.
It happens with Edie Falco, and then happens with Moretz. Because when the final scene is her at the counter at the mall.
That's true. The last two scenes are the same sequence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, because what that says, I think, dramatically is we aren't there, we don't need to hear it, but he listened.
Yeah.
Which is such
funny
like
is
that's
he's
going out on
physically,
a limb
literally
for
not
Louis.
listening.
Yeah, he's not listening.
It's like I'm gonna assume you're not listening until
He's being
there's, like,
comforted.
specific context clues.
He's allowing himself to be comforted that they're there,
Yeah.
but not listening to what they're saying.
Right.
Right, active listening is like, let me regurgitate your thoughts a little bit to you
Not
and
like
hear you.
not like knowing that you're there, but letting your voice be womp 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 womp.
It's exactly right. Or the music of
Yeah.
Well, she rubs his back and tells him how
Yeah,
he's
it was
great.
such like.
I just
Maggie Mayfish being a fish.
I don't know.
Well, we're about out of time.
Good.
What else?
Yeah, I always want to leave the floor open for final thoughts.
Oof.
Jerry Springer
think-
style.
I think I left it all on the table,
I
guys.
Yeah.
love that. This was
Yeah.
a captivating experience for me.
Very special episode of Frame Rate. Yeah, we won't always be this divisive.
Do we do the shout outs for social media?
Absolutely. Please tell everyone where they can find and follow you and your works.
Follow me on the Twitter thing, at Katy Stoll. Katy with a Y. Thanks. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Yeah, you can find me Maggie Mayfish, May with an E, not a Y, not the month. My dead grandmother. Yeah. Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Yeah.
And you know us as Small Beans.
Small Beans. Thank you again, guys. This was not fun, but fun.
But a good time nonetheless.
And so thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
And we love you.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.